growing up, my parents, we'd always go visit friends and family, and I never understood it, but we always showed up with a bag of fruit. We'd show up with a bag of oranges, a bag of apples, a bag of pineapples. It was just a thing that we did. And we always showed up because we always wanted to be hospitable, even though if we weren't going to our own home, just being at someone else's home. And then you'd have the conversations, you'd have all this fun, and to this day I still wear a pineapple, which anyone knows is the international symbol of hospitality. So to that theme, I want to thank all of you for coming out today and joining us for today's event. Consider this to be the proxy of my home, if you will, and our home at Automation Anywhere, and our partners Greenlight. So thank you for coming out today. I'll get us kick-started with the event and agenda. So today, there's gonna be a few puns in here every once in a while. We're gonna stir up some thoughts, some ideas, questions, and share experiences, plus hopefully a drink. And we have a number of specialists over here working with us today. So thank you to the BarChef team for having us today. What I thought we'd do today is walk us through just a presentation. I know when you got the invite, what you saw was putting generative AI to work, or automation and generative AI, the perfect mix, if you will. And what I want to say is generative AI is not automation, and automation is not generative AI. These are two things that come together in a recipe for success, but they are uniquely different. And we'll talk about that today. We'll have a panel of a few of our friends up here, some of your peers. We have Stephen and Brad who will be joining us, along with Shamez and Mark from Automation Anywhere. And I'd love it for us to have a conversation. We kept today's event pretty intimate, as you can see, and feel free to shout it, because we're definitely small enough to do so, or there are 5 wireless mics just begging to be spoken into. So that will go for about till 5:20. I thought it'd be great if we had Mark, who leads up our Center of Excellence for Automation and Generative AI, speak about how we at Automation Anywhere actually use our own technology, our own platform, perhaps inspire some thoughts and opinions. And then we'll get into the other portion of our event today, a little bit more fun, with the mixology lesson. So in true competitive spirit, it will be judged not by anyone here, but by the staff. The winners will get something, so a little bit of a fun event. And then we'll break around just 6:15 and have things wrapped up tightly by 7, as the team has reminded me a few times here. So with that said, let's jump into it. We've all seen the safe harbor slide. We are here in the safe harbor. Technology for us is always constantly changing, so obviously making decisions on what is actually available. Brief introduction, I mentioned myself. My name is Will Kwan. I'm the VP of Canada. It's really my job to be, I'll call it, hospitable to all of our customers and to drive success. My previous role, I worked with many customers, and it was always my frame of mind to say, how do we drive success? How do I treat this customer as if I were them? What is it that we need to do? And I'll talk a little bit about the team in Canada. I'll talk a little bit about what we're seeing here on the screen. So Imagine is our big customer event. We had about 1,000 guests in Austin in the middle of the summer, really walking through shared customer stories, what our roadmap looks like, and specifically, what are we doing around, call it next-gen technologies, obviously generative AI being one of the key elements. We had a really great story from Petrobras, which is a large oil and gas company in South America. They told a great story about how they used our automation engine tied to generative AI. They trained that generative AI in our favorite topic, taxes, and asked it, how can you optimize tax payments on the bills that we pay? From that, and again, we have a whole published story around this. It was a 3-week proof of concept where they anticipated a $25 million payback over the course of a year. The biggest walkaway, though, at least for me, was this gentleman here. If you can see him in the center, he's head of tax for Petrobras. He's like, first time my team was able to actually go and spend the weekend with their family at the end of the month. I thought that was pretty cool. Today's event wouldn't happen without any of the folks in today's room, so a thank you. A thank you to our customers here in Canada. This is just a collection of some of the titles and the names that hopefully you're familiar with, and we do work all around the world. Automation Anywhere has been providing solutions to customers for over 20 years. Last year was a breakout year, 150 million automations, large growth, specifically in our Copilot, which I'll talk about, because we too, like everyone, have a Copilot. That is what I refer to as the sriracha sauce of technology today. Everyone's got one. And we do a lot of documents. I saw somewhere, I gotta find that report, that Automation Anywhere is one of the largest employers in the world if you count the digital workers that our customers have. So again, thank you for everyone coming out today. And again, lots of stories here, happy to speak through them. My team is all here, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So with that said, again, my role here is to drive investment into Canada from Automation Anywhere. That's my mission, that's my drive. How do I see that happen? What do I see that kind of distilling up to? Kind of three key areas. We have a local team here in Canada, the collection of which are mostly in the room. We also have a local community. Great partners like Greenlight, as you'll see on the next slide. They've got folks spread across the country. And if we're not in that city, guess what? We'll fly there, we'll go there. We're happy to invest. A local account team, local solution engineers, local success team, and again, a local community of partners and then peers as well. Something we want to do much more of moving forward. Success and outcomes. So, I showed that safe harbor slide earlier. Things are changing with our platform. Things are changing in the technology landscape overall. We work in all of those places between your technology sets, between your technology investments. We're, I'll call it the seam in between, and we can be over top and beneath it. And I'll talk a little bit about that as well. But how do we translate that into things that are relevant to you? We do a number of workshops. These are workshops that we are happy to invest in. These are workshops that it's my job to bring the right resources to cover and help you drive towards what is it that you want to actually get to? What are the outcomes? So we do in-person virtual workshops, line of business enablement, you name it, we're there. Tailored roadmap sessions, even at a macro level, our technology set is constantly evolving. So just for we keep you up to pace into what are we seeing with our customers here in Canada and abroad. And the last piece around commercial success. I met with, about 10 months into my role now, and I met with a number of our key customers and really just kind of put them on a listening hat, if you will. And the things I heard was, listen, Will, we need your investment on our outcomes. We need a technology partner that's going to sit with us and not simply just be a vendor per se. Happy to do that, double down on that. We need a partner that's going to be commercially successful with us as well. So we need something that's going to be partnering for growth, competitive pricing certainty was something that they were asking for. I think we all see in our consumer lives, prices are certainly jumping. You probably have seen it in your technology investments as well. I'm here to say that we are investing with our customers, and we will give you a price lock, give you that forecasted, give you that certainty moving forward. So that's something that we are doing for all segments of our business across Canada. And again, we can't be doing this without our community of partners. I am so excited to be working with Greenlight Consulting. As I mentioned, they've got resources all around North America, all around here in Canada. They're headquartered out of Canada, so thank you to Shamez and Johan and why am I blanking all of a sudden? Angelique, thank you. Angelique, to joining us today in today's session. As you can see, they've been doing this for quite some time, have had numerous bullets of success up here in terms of the hours that they've helped save with their customers and the ultimate payback to, again, direct customers. I did want to touch on this very briefly. If for some of you I know are evaluating Automation Anywhere, evaluating automation RPA, if you will, some of us are already invested. These are the three key areas that really matter to our customers right now in terms of how do we leverage generative AI in addition to the capability set of Automation Anywhere. Three areas, I mentioned Copilot. Copilot, you can think of anytime you have an interaction where you have a human involved. or that interaction is occurring in front of a human, either embedded in an app that they're already using, or on the desktop of the machine, as opposed to the bot or the digital worker working in the background. If you want to loop that person, that review, if you will, our Copilot will allow you to do that. We're leveraging our Copilot tied to an LLM or a generative AI of your choice. That's what we're doing on the front office side. I mentioned earlier we do a lot of work with the doc automation, whether it's structured, semi-structured, even photographs of call it licenses and applications. We're using our doc automation tool to help string that into the process and again drive efficiency there. On the back side, this is where I get personally really geeky and excited about as a person that likes to build. We do automation Copilot for your automators. These are the folks who are actually building your automation workflows. Things like natural language prompts. Build me a process, build me an automation for insert target system, insert thing, SAP, Excel, what have you, Salesforce, ServiceNow. We actually just launched the first iteration of our Copilot for automators 3 days ago. So, very excited about that. That's all I'm going to talk to you guys about today. I want to be very brief. I've asked Mark Godair, who is a fellow Canadian. He flew from Dallas, which is where he lives today, to speak to us and talk to a little bit about what was it that we're doing at Automation Anywhere as ways to using our own technology and employing generative AI as part of that. Mark, thank you.
Thank you. Greetings, everyone. Nice to be with you today. I was telling someone that the weather in where I live in Texas was exactly the same a couple of days ago as in Toronto. Low of -11 and a high of -4, believe it or not. So I'm feeling at home. Anyway, excited to share with you for a few minutes. The first thing I wanted to give you some information on in terms of context was our own automation program. I find sometimes people think that you're an automation company, Automation Anywhere. I'm sure just out of the box you get a thriving automation program. But no, we actually have to work and put a lot of effort and thinking into growing our own program. And our program's been around for about 4 years, our actual automation program. Around 265 processes automated. One of the KPIs we keep an eye on is the dollar impact. So many of you, or all of you, I'm sure, know the idea of different value drivers. You might be focused on productivity or cost savings or cost avoidance, what have you. We combine that together into a dollarized impact. In terms of productivity, around 165,000 hours per year, and that's around 5% in terms of automated FTEs. And the right-hand side is interesting as well. So what's been exciting for us, and maybe I would say in particular with generative AI, this has really gone to another level, but we're seeing interesting use cases in every area of the business. Like many organizations, we started in areas like IT and finance, but as you can see, it's really exploded all over our own organization. So this is really interesting, I think. Like many of you, when generative AI came around, it hit us like it hit most people. What is this? What the heck is generative AI? Should I be afraid of it? Should I use it tomorrow? Just trying to understand it. And what we found was, as we started on that journey of understanding more about it, we understood very quickly it was going to have a huge impact and transform the value that we were delivering from our automation program. This is actually something that we shared in Austin. So imagine that where you see the 140,000 hours, that's where we sat in terms of an OKR. So in our organization, we had an OKR that said we want to deliver 140,000 hours back to the business. Generative AI came around, we started to understand more of its capabilities, and immediately my OKR doubled. And so what we're projecting now is that literally over the next year, we'll be able to deliver double the business impact in 1/3 the time. And I think all of those points are interesting. One thing that's interesting is just the amount of business value that can be delivered. The other thing that in many cases I think is somewhat being missed is the time to value. And we've got lots of stories like that. But a few years ago, if we talked about, we're going to deliver an automation with artificial intelligence. All of us that have any IT background, we think, oh, that sounds like an awesome 12 or 18-month project. And the time to value on some of these use cases is 2 months. We can give you some examples of those with pretty impressive ROI. So this is just, again, your picture may look very, very different, but we saw with generative AI complementing automation, the potential was pretty amazing. So this is a kind of interesting picture of some of the different use cases we're seeing in different business areas. Where you see a green check mark, those are automations that are actually live within Automation Anywhere. So we just hit, I think we just hit number 20. So we have around 20 automations that are leveraging generative AI. The one in the top left under finance that talks about supplier inquiry response, I'm going to show you in some detail in a couple seconds. Again, there's a lot of detail here. Happy to share the slides with you. One that I want to highlight here was in the area of customer support. If you look at the top right, when it talks about L1 and L2 ticket response. So this is just one example. Those of you that follow Automation Anywhere on LinkedIn will see that our SVP for customer support keeps winning awards. That function within Automation Anywhere is winning all these awards for service. One of the reasons that's happening is because they've got some extremely powerful digital assistants. So imagine a scenario where a customer has logged a support ticket, something's not working. I was trying this product and I got some kind of error message, so something wasn't working. We've got an automation using generative AI. It's using as data sources, or LLMs, our whole documentation repository. So if you're familiar with docs.automationanywhere.com, that's our documentation on the product. Also, every support case that's ever been logged. And we put generative AI on top of it and said, what's the right resolution for this issue? And that team, initially we told that team, this is generative AI, it's really new. Make sure you've got a human in the loop. You've got to be really, really careful. Always make sure you've got a human in the loop. That team kept testing it, and it was like they couldn't break it. The answers that were coming back were remarkably accurate. We had a funny situation one time where a customer, I don't know if they were trying to be funny, but they responded to it and said, thanks for the answer, give it to me in Spanish. They returned it in Spanish, and we didn't even notice. So they told us that story after. But that basically meant that for level 1 and level 2 support, almost the entire process was automated. And what's powerful is, what about the situations where you really need to bring in a human? What if the tone changes? Somebody's not happy, immediately it gets transferred over to a human. So it's automated to a high degree, but it's got some intelligence in terms of knowing when it needs to route for a human review. So that's one example of an automation. That one was worth around $500,000 of savings, just that one use case last year. And so where all that's coming from, and this stat is hot off the press. So this stat is not based on anything else other than our own experience with our own automation program. As I mentioned, we've released around 20 automations with generative AI. We had lots of background in non-generative AI automations over the last few years. So we did a bit of a comparison to see what does the ROI picture look like before and after adding generative AI. And we found it was around triple the ROI. So the use cases that we're doing with automation plus generative AI around triple the ROI. I'm just going to give you a couple examples. Time is short, but something from the back office. This first one's going to be a back office use case real quickly. And then front office, where you'll see Copilot in action. And then the last one is something that we've really, really been putting a lot of energy into, which is an interesting one, which is what are the kind of automations that any employee in your organization would want to use? That's the third one, not functional specific, but for every employee. So this one, we let the team name their own automations. They call it Bot Scooby. Real quickly, the situation here was just like the example I gave where we get customer support tickets from time to time. Our accounts payable team was receiving lots of requests from suppliers. I'm sure all of you have accounts payable functions or deal with suppliers. What are suppliers typically asking? Those inquiries, what would they typically look like? Well, in many cases, suppliers want to know when they're going to get paid. They'd say, when am I going to get paid? Here's the invoice number. In other cases, it might be things like changing bank information details, other different types of requests. So if you think about it, that kind of request comes in. Our first step is, what is it? What are they actually asking? And then if you look at these two branches here, very simply, the top branch is I can automate the response. And the bottom branch where you see the Copilot says escalation via Copilot is basically I can't automate the response. We need to send it to a human. If you think about it, you might recognize that pattern is very similar to what we see even for situations like customer support. A request comes in, what are they asking for? Is it possible for me to automatically respond, or do I need to involve a human? It's really the same kind of pattern, but in a different context. So I'm going to run this one demo. This will be the only demo that I run, but you'll get an idea of how this one works. So the first thing that happens here is, imagine these emails that are coming in, they're entirely unstructured. There's no structure to an email typically. So the very first thing we're going to do is generative AI is going to classify the message. So it's going to try and recognize what is this thing and what's the appropriate next action, which as it turns out is a beautiful capability of generative AI. And every communication, we're going to do one of these things. Either we can auto-respond, we can just ignore the message. What if the supplier is just saying thank you for a payment? Or the third case, we need to send it to a human. So in this case, we're basically checking the mailbox. What are the requests we've received from a supplier? And again, the very first thing is going to be, let's classify the request and determine what's an appropriate next action. So here the supplier is just saying thank you. Maybe we paid them yesterday, or we responded to another request of just saying thank you. So generative AI is going to recognize that that message doesn't require any other actions other than decision, file, response. Basically, we're just going to keep that message away for safekeeping in case we need it in the future. And then we go back to checking for another communication. Okay, here we've got a supplier saying we would like a payment update and they've specified a specific invoice number. Generative AI is going to come in here. First thing it's going to do is recognize that they're asking for a payment status. The second thing it's doing for us is pulling out useful information like the supplier name, the invoice numbers, and you can see that on the screen. It's been able to successfully extract that information. Why do we want things like the supplier name and the invoice numbers? Why do we want to gather that information? Well, if we have that information, we can now check with our finance system and actually get the payment status. So we use Workday financials, so that's what's happened here. We've gathered the information on the payment status from Workday. And why do we want all of that? Because now in the background, we were able to generate a message back to the supplier saying this is the payment status of the invoice. So in that scenario, there was no human touch required at all. Back to checking for requests. Similarly, this one looks like it's for a different supplier, but a similar request. So generative AI is going to recognize it's a payment status inquiry. The right thing to do is automatically respond on it to the supplier. And that's happened in the background. We'll actually show an example of one of those emails in a moment. So gather all the details from Workday on the payment status, and then we can automatically respond to the supplier. This one's a little bit different. So look at this. So the supplier is saying, requesting your intervention in this, we really need an ETA. So what's that? It's not a payment status inquiry. They're not asking for a bank request change or anything. Generative AI says, okay, this is something that needs to be escalated to the accounts payable team. How is that escalation going to happen? It's going to happen through Copilot. So the automation is going to create a Copilot request. Essentially what that's going to do is it's going to say, what system does that team frequently use? In our organization, we use Microsoft Teams a lot for collaboration. So it brought the request to them in Microsoft Teams via Copilot. It actually automatically generated a response to that supplier, which they can make some minor edits to and then click send. So even the accounts payable team didn't need to leave a system that they were already using, thanks to the magic of embedded automation with Copilot. And these are just a couple examples of some of the messages that went to the supplier as part of the demo. So here's an example. This was in the first probably 3 or 4 automations with generative AI that we went live on within Automation Anywhere. That's delivering lots of value for us. So we have, as you can imagine, no shortage of interesting demos on situations like that. Here's a completely different use case. The context here is we're trying to book a sales order. The challenge we had is that if you think about an order booking process, the sales team's got one priority. We want to get the order booked, but it's a cross-functional process because we've got some different agreements in place. We have a contract operations function. We might have legal involved to make sure that we've got the right agreements in place. And we found in that process there was lots of friction. So somebody's trying to book a sales order, but then the contract operations team is telling the sales team, oh, you didn't include the right agreements, that kind of back and forth. So what can we do to solve that? What we did was we brought a Copilot function into Salesforce. Salesforce is the system we use. That's the system that the account executives spend their time in. We brought Copilot in there. We were able to add validation. We were even able, using generative AI, to detect redlining. That was one of the big challenges, is some of these agreements would have many pages in them, and we were able to provide redlining detection to say, the customer's redlined page 52, paragraph 3, line 4. So imagine the time savings of doing all that. And by moving the validation up, we didn't have any of that back and forth anymore. In other words, when this primary quote leaves the sales account executive's desk, we already know that we've got all the right agreements in place. Again, that's live in our organization with our account executives using it. And this one was time savings of just over 3,000 hours. So what can you do? So those are interesting for specific business functions. What can you do for every employee? That's a really interesting challenge that we've been working with. And so one of the first automations we did for all employees, we call it content assimilator. So very simply, what does this do? Many times somebody will forward us a video, maybe some information on generative AI capabilities or a product demonstration or something, some kind of video or a long article. And you look at it and you say, that sounds really interesting. I don't have that many minutes or hours in the day to assimilate that. And that's what the content assimilator is born for. You can hand in a video link, you can hand in a long article, it applies generative AI to it, and just hands you back, here are the highlights. And it's got different customization. If you watch the demo video, you'll see it's got customizations, all the fun things you can do in generative AI, like, it's been a long day, just give it to me in grade 8 English, you can do that. You can summarize all different levels, but it basically just gives you the highlights. So we thought that was kind of a cool productivity one for all of our employees. So hopefully that was helpful. We have all sorts of interesting examples of those kind of automations, but hopefully that was inspirational just in terms of the capabilities. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. Question? This mic a little further away. It's funny, I've been in those threads of sales, talking to sales ops. Can we create a generative AI that makes the emails between those two groups much more nice? I don't know if you ever have seen that before, but that'd be great if we could do that. And maybe translate some of I've certainly been guilty of this, writing in 4th grade English to sales ops, translating that into more comprehensive English. All right, well, thank you, Mark. I'm gonna ask Mark to join us on the panel and have a few other folks jump in with us as well. So let's have Stephen Wheeler from Element Fleet Management join us, Brad Eddy from First Capital REIT, FCR, and Shamez Mehdi from Greenlight. And then
Do you have a seating plan? Can I just sit in?
you can sit anywhere. And if you want to grab each a digital conch to speak into, you may need to turn on the mic. And I have not tested the sound levels yet, so hopefully this will work. If not, we can just pass the microphone through. By the way, just a quick question for the group here. In terms of, I know some of you are just getting started with automation, and perhaps some of you are on the journey of generative AI. Just by show of hands, who's involved in anything that's touching or knows that your organization is starting to play and work with generative AI? Just anybody here? A couple folks? Interesting, okay. I'm always curious to understand that. Well, let me ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves, talk a little bit about their program and what they've seen with our platform and automation. I'm going to ask Shamez. Shamez, you've got almost a decade of experience here working with automation, and you've certainly seen a lot of our customers. Yes.
Not good with the mic.
Yeah. Maybe we don't use the mic. We can just shout. Yeah. But Shamez, maybe I just ask you to start things off. What have you seen in I'll call it the overall landscape here in Canada or in North America as in terms of like where are customers starting? Where do they drive success from? Like some of the stories that you've seen.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting about Canada is, we've been doing this about 7 years. Canada was actually ahead of the curve worldwide for a long time. A, because our banks are really fickle and want it to be as efficient as possible. Mm-hmm. So the big banks spent a lot of time pushing. And then we sort of went into the lull over the pandemic. And what I've seen over the last year or two, especially as money's gotten more expensive and we've gone from sort of growth to operational excellence into refocusing on, a posture for scale. Nobody's ready to go fast, but everyone's sort of looking to say, how do I go from what I do today, and if I have to grow by 15 or 20% in 2025, how do I not hire anybody else? They're all really expensive. So it's interesting. We started in a world of, I want to just get ROI and save headcount, and we're seeing a lot of, at least businesses in Canada that see the future's bright, go, how do I ensure I scale? So, finance is always like table stakes in the world we live in. So if you haven't done AP automation, that's a great place to start, but that's bread and butter. I think one thing that we're starting to see, I'll give you an example that I think was really neat that has been generative AI and automation, and it's in lease classification. So we work with a lot of commercial real estate companies, They've got leases that are brand new, leases that are 20-year-old, and leases that are 50 years old. And they have no idea what risks they're carrying on the books. And so what they've done now is use sort of intelligent automation models and generative AI to go read these leases and come back to their lawyers and say, here's where your risks are. These clauses are not in these leases. The clauses have changed every year in these leases. And so just give them a heat map of where they should be scared and where they need to look at. And so this is something they would never do. This is the 1% problem, right? Like low risk of failure, high impact if it fails. Nobody ever looks at that stuff and like, it won't happen. And now they're going, oh crap, we can look at them and we can look at them quickly. So
Yeah.
It's starting to look at problems you just couldn't get to, which I see sort of as the art.
I love that story because it does what at least my interpretation of Gen AI does is it accelerates time to value and it democratizes the skill. It democratizes the knowledge to be able to do that, right? Mark showed the example. My sales team, I love you guys to bits, not the best at sales operations, right? But our sales operations folks, if we can have the generative AI paired with our automation engine to do those checks and balances, similar to the story you just mentioned is, that benefits us all. Excuse me. Stephen, why don't I have you introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your role at Elite Fleet. You've been a long-standing customer with us, a lot of success, and I'll let you cover off some of the bullets you have here, but maybe we start this. Where'd you guys start? How did you get started?
Sure. We started in 2017, 2018, and it was myself and one other individual building bots or automations underneath our desk. I had 4 computers at my desk being used as runner machines, and so very much grassroots type of story. And as we started the journey, anything that's high volume, manual, repetitive type work across legacy systems, where we had standard structured workflows where we could get these high volume, this type of work and get better results for our employees, give them back time, better quality for our customers. Those were our focus areas. And since then, we scaled to 30 people, and we've done about 200 plus automations now across the portfolio. And that saved us over 200,000 hours. So we've had a great journey, lots of success. The beginning suggestions I have for anyone, don't pick something really big and difficult at the beginning. Pick something that is simple, has a lot of high volume, and you can get some quick wins and then build your momentum after that. I'd also say, as we talking about the generative AI piece, as we look across some of the use cases we had here today, this is where we're focused, and I'll talk maybe if I can a bit more later about it. We're focused on any unstructured processes now, any language-based processes. Those are where we're focused. So any emails, document AI, which I just mentioned, the amount of benefit we can see in the speed to value with document processing now is unprecedented. We've done OCR for 5 or 6 years with this portfolio, and we've done machine learning training, but we have never seen this amount of benefit this quickly and the accuracy to read very unstructured documents. So that's just a bit about my team, my portfolio, and then what we're focused on next. Very exciting times with generative AI, as you guys you hear the word co-pilot a lot.
Yeah.
So happy to share my experience on it.
Yeah, Steve, I love talking to you because I feel like when you and I talk, we start to geek out a bit, just on like what you're up to, what you're doing. So please, if you've got any questions for Steve, he's a great resource to kind of talk through what an organization that has really embraced not just automation, but that next generation technology has done. Why don't we have Brad speak? Brad, you mind if I cue you up? Yeah. First of all, FCR, I like to play this game, and James and my team knows I do this. I didn't know FCR as a brand really well before I met you guys. But now I know First Capital REIT, and I see that logo. I see it everywhere around the city, all the open air malls. And I take pictures and I send them sporadically to James, who's their account executive. And I just write, do you see it? James has to play along the game, say yes, well, I do see it. But the thing I love about your story about at FCR is you guys have a whole product life cycle around it, in terms of utilizing technology, not just leaving it kind of static, right? So please introduce yourself, talk to us a little bit about it.
Brad, work at First Capital REIT, real estate owner and operator, and glad I came here already because I heard a bit about lease contract intelligence, which is something we always struggle with. Knowing when we can't open a donut shop at some center because in 1968 someone had an exclusive right to donuts through that center, and
This has happened to you guys.
nobody knows anything about it. And, yeah, you're 10 minutes from a deal with Tim Hortons until you realize you can't do this. And also, I love your story about the AP inquiry response bot. We process tons of invoices, and I'm sure we get about 7,000 of those emails a month from the lawnmower or the snowplower wondering where their payment is. But what Will is saying, like our automation program started by necessity in 2020. This is full on COVID, and there's a program called SECRA. This is the Canadian Emergency Commercial Real Estate Assistance, I think. Anyways, to enroll in this program, you had to collect tons of data and fill out all of these forms across your portfolio, thousands and thousands of tenants who need help, many of whom could never fill out a form in given 5 years to do it, let alone like 5 days. So we're able to implement automation anywhere in short order, and we had bots collecting data from our systems, collecting data from our customers, filling out forms, sending it to the government, getting our tenants on this program so we could keep our business running. So it was critical to success during that period. It grew from there. Our next automations were far less successful. Actually, they're actually negative value. Like once we did start tracking our product life cycle and understanding the value of automation, understanding the return on investment, we applied those to some of our original bots, and we're like, no, this is a negative value bot that does nothing for our business. So we started retiring negative value bots, bringing in new ones, understanding when a bot performance was poor, or it should be reallocated, or doing something a little differently. And since then, we started applying a little bit more of a like process and understanding like when to build a bot and under what conditions. We've done a lot better. Now, looking at some of the other savings on this slide here, I'm a little embarrassed by my 3.
We all start somewhere. It's okay.
But,
Yeah.
you know, we were roughly doubling every year, and I'm really pleased with our progress and love some of the new use cases we're seeing, especially when it comes to unstructured emails coming into these inboxes that are constantly monitored by people. We could even take half of that and respond automatically to be massively impactful. And I'm looking forward to doing some of that work this year and next.
Well, I have 100,000 unread emails that Johan can't stand. Just put it on my own.
Now AI just responds.
Do we have any questions from the audience? This, by the way, this board up here was going to be my ambition was that we all come in and write questions and I'd be able to peel questions off the board, but none of you guys have questions here. So I'm going to ask the group right now. Questions?
Well, there's written in questions.
Oh, there are written questions.
There are.
Yes.
Yeah. So even if you don't have any automation today, should you jump directly into Gen AI?
Should we jump? I'll turn it to the panel.
You probably should wade into it. I don't know if jumping into it's the right call, but when we think of like why you should automate something, it's value to you, and it will cost you less to do it, and you'll get your ROI. I always say if you kind of get your ROI within 18 months, that's a great use case, as long as you're not retiring at age 1. And like an email classification automation, and then a robot that goes and does something with it. I don't think that's that ambitious anymore. So I would say, look, like if there's smoke and you feel like it's worth the automation, it's not difficult to wade in. And you don't have to start with all my emails. You can just be like inquiries about supplies and sort of build your model from there. So there's ways to chunk it out to start and be safe. That's the question. Thoughts?
Yeah, I'd say I don't know what the right answer is, but I wouldn't be scared of it. I'd say if you're looking at 2 use cases, like one that needs Gen AI to be successful and one doesn't, I'd evaluate them on the return you
find something's high volume, historically it's always been, hey, this process might be too unstructured, it's email paragraphs or the service about case or service now, or documents are too complicated. The volume is there because of these types of tools. Now there's ways to make decisions like humans do to understand unstructured paragraphs of text. That's where we can now look at using that using the tool to make those decisions. And once you figure out, hey, I always have to get these data points in this email, the rest is relatively straightforward. You just sort of into the systems and workflows. So I'd say that's a really value driven. You always want to think about what is the value, why are we doing what we're doing? The 5 whys I always like to say, that's like my I have a CI background, so we're always trying to think about what's the win-win process, why are we doing this in the first place, what does the customer care about, who's the person upstream from the process and downstream from the process, and then how do we augment the workflow with a tool. We always understand why first before we jump to solutioning, I would say, and then think about the value of ROI. And it might not just be like cost savings in terms of hours saved, it could be cycle time. I can make something versus income faster. That's time to value on money, especially with the interest rates and the way we look at the environment of inflation, as well as quality customer service, NPS, and employee experience. So just lots of things there, but always think about the business side.
Can I add quickly? What's the reason we try to make the first automation sort of chunk of it, right? And it's usually not the capability of the toolkit. It's usually the immune system in your own organizations, right? How do we deploy this tool? How do we get InfoSec to say yes? How do we make sure the change management works if people are freaking out that role? But that's usually why the first process is small, so we can kind of plow through all those internal issues and deliver some value fairly quickly. And so regardless of whether it's big or small, those are the things you want to go through. So you want to deliver value to get through that first pass. And then, hey, once everyone on your IT teams and your InfoSec teams and we know how to talk to your business, that's all done. It's a lot easier to do 2 and 3 and make it more complex. Now you can take on some of this.
Will, can I just add?
You may.
Thank you.
Everyone, yeah, and it's part of my team.
I like the intro. Great. Hey guys, so I'm a sales guy, so I'm a little passionate about this point here, which is there's always often there's something going on, right? Like I'm waiting for SAP HANA to get installed, and then I'm going to automate. Once it's getting installed, it'll be done in 2026. I'm waiting for SharePoint to get finished, and then I'm going to automate. I'm waiting to create a new process for my call center, and then I'm going to automate, right? Well, I mean, those are all great things, right, to wait for, but the truth is very likely you can automate and start seeing ROI way before that next shoe drops, right? Just because in this day and age, it doesn't take a long time. The cycle to create an automation and create ROI is almost always, much shorter than it takes for you to get that next, the next milestone that you're waiting for before you continue. So, in my perspective, when you're saying, should we wait? I would usually say no, because there's always something to wait for, right? I would say, if you can get an ROI today, like you would never wait to save at home, right? You would never, whether that's time or money, you would never wait for something to happen. So it'd be the same thing, right? If you can build an ROI today and start saving today, then you just have to very likely just tweak it for in the process, when the upgrade, when the whatever is ready. But in my eyes, nobody ever was happy waiting, right? Is my opinion.
Yeah, that's exactly the model that we found very successful. We're building 3 to 4 automations a month. We're saving us half to 1 full-time equivalent for 2,000 hours each. And it's really like do we wait 2 years for the new system, or do you get within 4 to 6 or 8 weeks the equivalent of 4,000 hours? You're going to always want to take that savings as you can get it, and then build it momentum. So that's exactly how we've scaled to the size we have in a short period of time, and very, very successful.
And again, my team is ready to step in and help start the conversation with you along with our partners. I think what we're talking about here is the classic progress over perfection, if you will. So, great question. Do you have to start with Gen AI? You don't have to. You can start with just the automation unto itself. And like Mark, I've certainly seen the automations just be automations, which are hugely helpful. And then you're like, what's this? Oh, it's a little smarter today. And we've added a little layer of Gen AI over top. So definitely an iterative process.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So the automation means sometime when you implement a robot, you need to integrate with your ERP
Did everyone hear the
Let someone else
question?
take that if they want first,
Yeah.
and then I can.
Yeah, I can go first and say that was a big concern of mine. I found it to be not as much of a problem as I thought it would be. Like for your ERP system specifically, like ours doesn't change much. When it does change, we know it's changing, and we will always have the opportunity to test. So part of that is just knowing your automations that are out there, knowing what systems they're interacting with, knowing when you're changing a system to validate that automation. When our automations have broken, it's pretty straightforward to get them running again. Someone, automation developer goes in there and says, oh, you know, this thing is now over there, or there's a pop-up box, now it has to say yes. It's, you know, if we didn't have change management, it would take like 10 minutes to update, but because we have change management, we have to put it through that, and it takes like a day or two. So that it wasn't impactful for our ERP. Where it has been impactful is some of our SaaS solutions that are like less business critical are more problematic. We have like one of the negative value bots that we built was this IT service management user provisioning bot. And when somebody resigns or is terminated, this bot picks up like, oh, you know, John like resigned. Okay, terminate his access. And one thing it would do is open up the Zoom webpage administration and like delete John as a user. Zoom moves their delete button like 3 times a week, and it's completely impossible to interact with. We had to stop using the bot. So part of it is on ERP, wasn't a big deal, but some of the SaaS vendors where you do not have control, it can be more problematic. Some bank website, never, I was worried about it changing, hasn't changed once in 3 years, never changes.
I can echo that completely. We've automated against 40 applications, and we've done over 3 million transactions a year. And everyone always thinks like bots are going to break. Oh my gosh, Armageddon! And virtually zero, if not very little impact. Slight UI changes, and a lot of it is also having a good support model, good documentation. And when you design a bot, you want to try and keep it structured, standardized as much as you can. So when you're making really complicated, like it's going to go through 50 screens, and then you obviously increase your risk. So you want to really think about structure and support. But just to reiterate what Brad said, you know, a lot of the applications you have don't change nearly as much as you like them to be. And the supportability and the model you have, even if it does change, you know, within a day or two, the bots are so easy to maintain, especially with automation labor and the way the code is, versus like 1,000 Python scripts. That's the whole purpose of it. So it does give the weight for supportability.
The other thing is this interesting use of generative AI that we're using to partially solve this problem. So right now we're working on something that we call resilient automation. So this example of, oh shoot, like on the system we moved the button over. Generative AI is going to scan the web page and detect those and automatically work anyway. That's another use of generative AI that we're delivering this year. It's kind of cool.
The other thing too that we've done is we do regression testing now. So we actually, for all of our bots, they run against the applications of test case in the QA and dev environments, and we're very integrated with our IT team. Our IT team actually comes to us for bots as well because they're faster, cheaper, more effective, and the supportability is there. So we're actually getting a consumer of our product, which is our IT team. And our IT team, you know, sometimes is a little bit nervous about bots. They come to love our bots, and they actually support them in our entire program very early.
So you're saying you run your production bots in a non-production sandbox, and so you know there's going to be a problem before you build.
Correct. Regression testing, sometimes we run daily, or we're very close on when the change management's going to come. So they actually partner with us and say, this change is coming, it's in dev, test your bots, make sure it's good. And then 99% of the time, we're way ahead of before it even goes to production.
That's a great question. The other thing I would add is the platform's got lots of different ways of automating, and some ways of automating are better for some systems than others. So there's some SaaS applications we deal with that are, like you mentioned, it feels like every 10 minutes they're changing the user interface. So, you know, APIs are the solution in that case. How are we using APIs? They never change, and problem solved. But it used to be, you know, a frustration with them breaking just with that particular system.
Just one more example on that. We work with medical systems, and although they do change, not as often, what doesn't change is the keystrokes. And because nurses and doctors get used to keystrokes when they're entering things. And so the idea that there's sort of multiple ways to automate, and if you know sort of that space a little bit, you'll pick the right way to integrate with that tool and make it life easier.
Jan, do we have any other questions from the? We do. Let's do one more question.
Does automation really scale? How do I get buy-in from execs?
Interesting. Really scale. Buy-in from execs.
Yeah, I report directly to our executive team, and we actually, in our management discussion analysis for a publicly traded company, we actually publicize the amount of transactions or volume or ROI or Attendees to the public. So the program's become that level. So to get to that executive level buy-in, you need to make sure you're proving business value. Business value, business value, business value. What is the savings? What is the benefit to the customer? So the more you can tie your RPA, your automations back to business value. How is this helping my cycle times, my NPS scores? How is it helping win customers? Give me the actual hours saved, cost avoidance benefit. Shamez mentioned this, as companies are growing, this is part of how our transaction volumes increase. We've had teams that didn't need to hire 10 people because the bot took over the manual work, as we've added tremendous amount of business volume. So getting them in front of them, but you have to present it in a way that's digestible for the executive team, and that's always business case value, numbers, benefit, and then examples. People love stories. These sales guys, they tell you all kinds of stories. And it's for a reason.
And most of them are true.
Seriously though, those are some of the most powerful engagements I've had with my executive team, is when we can tell a story. This is how it was, and this is what we did, and this is the benefit, and make it very translatable to the bottom person or kindergartner to an executive. The simpler, the better.
Agreed. Yeah, I think just to layer on that, I think we've really been trying to make sure that we're speaking in the language of whoever that executive is. They've got their own plans, they have their own objectives, business objectives, they have their own KPIs that are close to their heart. We're trying to move the needle on these KPIs. So it changes the conversation. What are the automations that will help you achieve your objective? That's an easy way, rather than they're focused on this KPI and we keep talking about hour savings. They're like, I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about
Exactly. So can you talk to the VPs and the executives, say, what's your strategic plan for the year? Like right now is a great time to start of the year, and then how are programs supporting business objectives and goals for what they're trying to achieve?
It's funny, I actually think it's harder to convince midline management than it is to convince executives to do automation. Because I think, we get lost in the politics of it, but headcount matters at that level. At an executive level, endpoints matter. And so historically, it's hard to get through the middle of the organization than it is even like the frontline staff and the executive staff. They're kind of like, I want to not work overtime. I don't want to work the weekend. And the executive's like, I don't care how this gets fixed, just fix it, right? And so that's historically been the challenge. And then in terms of scale, I think that's the best part of this. This is inherently scaling. So I had a customer, that had a month-end process, and their business got so busy over the pandemic that they would just call every month and be like, hey, I just need another bot. And all we would do is provision the bot, and it would learn everything it needed to do instantaneously and handle more transactions because they had a window that they wanted to get all these transactions done. So the very nature of this technology is scale. I think that's the part it's been good at.
And just to add, right, like scale, like we have clients that have 3,000 plus digital assistants helping employees do work, right? And even I was talking with Mark, where he's telling they're going to deploy to every employee in Automation Anywhere this digital assistant technology, right? So the ability to scale the platform to help end users or employees is there inherently in the platform, right? So I don't know.
Yeah, and once you build your bots on your applications, the credentials are reusable, the code's reusable, the software infrastructure is reusable, your virtual machines, and everything's in the control room. So as you build, you create momentum, and you save yourself time on the next build, and you're typically, as our program went, the frontline users who are helping us build the automations because it's manual, repetitive work that they don't want to do. They're actually the ones coming to us now, and our pipeline doubles, triples, quadruples. Because now you've got people that are engaged, they want to use the technology, they want to help you your day-to-day. So it scales both on the front end and the back end as you use it more. So the more you can build that momentum sooner, the faster you get.
And when you're contemplating the use case, that's one of the big questions. Like, is this thing going to scale? Because when you look at, is this a good idea to build this? What's the ROI going to be? Tell me that it's going to scale either to lots and lots of people using it or lots and lots of transactions. Those are kind of two typical ones. So like these examples that Elias was just mentioning, If we build the content assimilator, who's going to use it? If it's Mark, nobody cares. But if I can tell them, hey, we got 300 people that are going to use it, that's where the business value comes from, right? We got lots of people using it.
I have a question. You guys are talking about when you have volume.
Mm.
If you have volume, yes, automation. But what happens if you don't have volume, but you have a lot of things that are very inefficient, the way that it's done in the company? So everything that I'm hearing here is just volume.
Yeah, I'll give an answer to that. So at First Capital, we're not a huge company. We have about 300 people, and there is no department or group of people at our company who are all doing the same job at numbers more than like 20 or 25. And we've also not done any automations in those areas. Yet, in our program where we have built our bots, built our automations, you can see on our slide there that our hours have doubled every single year since 2021, like 500, then 1,000, then 3,000. This year it'll be more than 6,000. And we have scaled, like doubled that savings every single year with a flat level of investment. So we haven't spent any more money in 2023 than we did in 2021. And it keeps growing and it keeps growing and it keeps growing. And that was the same thought that I had when I was coming into this role and looking at the company, looking at the opportunities, just thinking there is no real like killer app here or high transaction volume use case that'll really like show off this technology. Yet, despite that, we've been very successful, more optimistic now than I was back then, especially like hearing about use cases like AP inquiries, like I need to change this, I need to change that. That would be transformative for our AP department. And stuff like this, I think, even though now it feels like pretty cutting edge, 3-5 years from now, it's gonna be like table stakes stuff. Now is the time, regardless of your size.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And then with processes, you always really want to start with what is the process? Why do you have multiple different ways of doing something? Can you standardize that work? Can you get to an 80-20 with the work? And I feel like people get obsessed with getting to 100%. Sometimes automating something, and that I found is not the right approach. I'd rather take 80% of my 2,000 hours and build it in 6 to 8 weeks than let's spend 2 years going after the full 100%. So I'd say that's one piece. The other thing I'd say too is because the COE, the bots, or the RPA COE, the cost to build one of these things versus the ROI, even if it's like a 0.1, 0.2, 0.3 full-time equivalent, hundreds of hours, it's still palatable. That's like one of the best things about the platform is the cost versus and the ROI for something that IT might say, yeah, it's not worth looking at, it's a few hundred hours savings. That's where we can come in and help the small guy or the person who's doing the manual work, even if it's not like a massive savings.
Also, we forget we can empower those users, right? I think for those of us that started when Excel came out, nobody wanted to give Excel to everybody, and it's probably one of the greatest automation tools that we've ever had. And these tools are now at a point where if you've built your governance models, if you have some libraries that are usable, your end users can automate for themselves, and you can make sure they work in sort of a format with the right sort of approach and governance. And you don't have to think about it as a central organization. You're actually driving, you can see the value, you can track it, you can make sure you're accounting for it, but you don't have to build it. And so as you think about the small ones, there's ways to build the small ones that don't involve sort of these centralized teams that I think it depends on the person at the end, like, a little bit of a technical skill set. You don't need experts to build small organizations.
Yeah, democratization of automation.
And one thing I wanted to add to that, so it'd be great if you had a process that would save you 100 hours. That'd be fine. But if you do 25 processes that save 4 hours, that's the same thing, right? So now our bots aren't married to that process, right? It's not like you say, I want to do this process, takes an hour a day, I need one bot. Then I have a second process that's an hour a day, I need a second bot. One bot can do multiple processes, right? So what we see a lot of times too is that first you scale, then you see how it works and you optimize, right? You free up those bots, now they can do other stuff, right? You scale again, then you optimize. You got them going too, right? So it's that, you don't need, it's great if you have a big volume use case, but if you have a handful of, low-hanging fruits that you can optimize right away and automate right away, that's the same thing, right? It just depends, you don't have to always find the big bang, but again, it's just about starting and the ball will flop 24 hours, right? So
And tack on one thing too, and we don't track this, but ask any accountant, and not every hour is created equal. Like an hour at quarter end, month end, year end is hugely valuable versus some hour they care about a lot less. And I've heard from people who say like, hey, I don't have to do bank reconciliations at month end, and saving that 3 hours a day allows me to get home on time or not work on Saturday, and that is like huge. And give people the tools to do their job. Happy people, happy employees, happy company. It's impactful. It doesn't show up in the numbers, but it's real.
Plus the accuracy, right? Like it's not going to make those mistakes, right? So
Yeah, so in a really large organization, how do you envision setting up the support that you would need? So you have all these bots everywhere. Like, I get it, you can automate pieces instead of waiting for the end to end. But you need, I'm guessing, someone on staff or some department on staff. It's not IT, because you distinctly said there's IT and then there's us. What kind of skill set do those people have to have? So, for example, in the finance area, Alteryx, Power BI, our senior execs are, we're gonna, this is citizen-led automation time. Everyone in finance is gonna be a Power BI user and an Alteryx, and we're gonna automate everything in sight. It's unrealistic.
Right.
And even when you send them to a couple training sessions, it's unrealistic.
Yes.
Like, you need, my experience, you need a team that has a certain skill set. So you don't have to go to IT, because that's the objective, let IT work on the bigger things, but within the business, have this skill set group that can support all the bots and make sure the bots are, over here in this silo, they're building 17 bots. Well, guess what? 15 of those can really be used over here as well, but nobody knows they exist over here.
Yes.
So, how do you envision that kind of support mechanism being set up?
Classic support and governance. We'll talk through that, and then we'll take the questions and move into our next event as well. I just want to make sure, as time is done, all created equal. Move to the next thing. Yes. But let's talk about governance and support, and then we've got a number of key individuals here. Elias is one of our solution engineers. We have Renal back there as well, another solution engineer. James Dia are here from my team. And again, our partners from Greenlight are happy to talk through this. And of course, Mark is part of our COE for automation. But gentlemen?
I can start. The three models that we've seen and heard from many different players is centralized model, where everything comes through the center of excellence. So any bot that needs to be built, it goes through the team. They have best practice sharing. They have all the documentation. There's an offshore development team typically. That's how my team works. And then we just make sure everything is best practice, standardized, codes, reusable, and supported, which is the key. Yes. And then from that, we're not the not so great thing is all the people that want to build sites, and they can generate value. So each of these models has pros and cons. It's the same with a federated model or a completely decentralized model. So these bigger organizations do end up getting these teams that are multiply working on the same thing. My general feedback suggestion is creating a governance layer so that you can support these. You can filter best practice. It really depends on the organization. It depends on the buy-in. And then our company was soft audited and we passed because of the way we set up everything with control room, all our credentials and all the logins to our systems. We passed the test. So if you think about the type and size of the organization, there is literally governance that is necessary as you scale these programs. So the citizen development model, I've heard various benefits and ways of deploying it successfully. Shamez mentioned it earlier with levels of technical depth, but my best practice that I've seen is trying to create that set. I think you alluded to a central layer that is helping with best practice, it's helping grow, it's helping reuse use cases. But like I said, it depends on the buy-in culture, really depends on the organization, how you set up the as well.
And what skill set do the support people need in that group?
Again, it depends on what we're doing. My team is all offshore development, computer science background, and we're layering multiple technologies for our solutions. But if you're doing very, very simple things, you might be able to have a smaller team that's more business adept at VBA macros we started, typically back in the day, and then they can do the low code, no code. And you think about Power Automate, that's what it is now. What's stopping anyone from going and using Power Automate for what they're doing? It's the same argument. That's just going to continue. So how can we train people, have best practice, and create that governance layer in a way that's more manageable? Because we don't want people building stuff and breaking all the time. So there's a degree of where it's really great because you want people to do that instead of doing 300 hours of entering stuff you can do with Power Automate, but you want to make sure it's supportable. So there's only so much damage you can do with the breaks. And there is a balance there depending on the organization.
And I think of it like gates. If you don't want to get rid of creativity in organizations because people will find a way. And so you'll end up with these end user computing solutions. So historically what I find is if one person has built it, they're going to support it for themselves. If you see that is something that migrates to the business unit or the subgroup, historically that's supported by the expert in the subgroup. And it's still governed, it's got the right code. And then at some point you go, this is bigger than this group, and you bring it back in. And that's an active effort, it's not passive. You kind of have to go through. And it allows sort of level of creativity right at the root, and allows you to bring the things central you want to do central. I do think that if you just put in the roadblocks, you get solutions you don't want to see.
And from that level of it, right? Sorry.
No, I was going to take one angle on your question, and you're talking about, you're exactly what they're saying, like, everybody's going to do this, everybody's going to do that, like, unrealistic.
Yeah.
But my counterpoint is, everybody needs on their desktop the tools they need to do their job. And there was some point in history where all of a sudden everybody had Excel, and nobody knew what the hell they were doing, but there was like a person who figured it out, and now they do your Excel, and over time, now everybody knows how to do, well, just about everybody knows how to do Excel, and people have those tools on their desk to do their job. And right now, yeah, you're gonna put an automation anywhere console on everybody's desk. Some people are never gonna use it, but one person, two people, three people will use it just as part of their daily job, and they will just go get it done. Last summer, we have a big internship program at First Capital, and we had this intern in our leasing department who was tasked to do something. I don't know what it was, but she came and she's like, at school, they teach us Python, and I know I can use Python to do this job they asked me to do. They expected it to take her all summer, but she wanted to do Python. It would take her 2 days. And we have no way of getting somebody to do Python on their desktop, but the skill set is coming out of the colleges and the universities. Like, it is there, and these people, they need the tools on their desktop to do their jobs, to do the things they're asked to do, and they'll just do it. Like, you don't have to do anything except give them the capability.
For sure. Yeah, the one other thing I'd add, it's probably obvious to you, is like, I think ultimately a really, really healthy function like you're describing, the skill set's really diverse. Like, if you were to look at my team, you'd see people that are really heavy on the business side, and then you'd see really, really geeky people, like my background. You see that whole thing, but you don't start there. So that skill set will grow. So for example, people that have an eye for what a good use case is, that in itself, that doesn't require writing code. It's not really a technical question, but people develop that aptitude to look at it and say that thing will fly and get a great ROI on it. So being able to assess value and things like that. But in the early days, lots of those functions start one or two people that are keen about the technology and about the potential and willing to take some basic training, and off you are to the races.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank the panel for joining me today. Mark, Shamez, Brad, Stephen. We plan to do more of these events here and across Canada. By all means, please, as I kicked it off, take us up on our hospitality. Let us come into your homes, your corporate homes, if you will, and continue the conversations. I will come out with a bag of oranges like my mom would want me to. We have been known to show up with treats, by the way. But again, thank you all for coming out for today. I want to transition the night to the BarChef staff, where they're going to take us through a workshop, I believe. So thank you, gentlemen and team. And then we'll wrap it up just before 7 o'clock. Perfect. Thanks again. Great conversation.